In today's lab test, we're going to see how close we can come to Eddie's tone on Van Halen 1 album using digital amps. Today's lab test was born out of a conversation I was having in a Facebook group I belong to. The topic of the conversation was modelers versus amps. I've been using modelers for years, starting back when I couldn't afford any of the tube amps I coveted. I think I've been through all iterations of the higher-end Digitech modelers, starting with the GNX3 and moving up through the line as the new models came out. I've owned the GNX3000, I've owned the RP500, I've owned the RP1000. In fact, I still own the RP1000, and I may make a video on that. Be interesting to see how those models hold up, against the modern modelers. While I knew, especially back then, that these amp modelers didn't sound exactly like their physical counterparts, I liked the versatility and could generally coax usable tones out of them. I currently do almost all of my demos and videos on modelers. I'm currently using the Universal Audio Effects line of amp pedals. They are the Lion, Ruby, Dream 65, and Enigmatic. Those are the four that I own. I use these for my videos because they are very easy to set up and remove several of the hassles you typically face when recording and miking up a live tube amp, such as miking up the speaker and the consistency and setting levels and all that stuff, the noise. We all know to get a tube amp to sound really good, you kind of have to crank it up into that sweet spot, and while attenuators will allow you to do that in a bedroom environment, it's just a lot to set up. The modeler, however, like currently I've got the guitar plugged into the Universal Audio Lion, and the Lion emulates a 68 plexi. The Universal Audio Effects pedals, they plug straight into my DAW. They're quieter and much more consistent than trying to mic up, a live amp and doing a demo with it. So in the middle of this conversation, as luck would have it, or fate, Dweezil Zappa put out a video where he played Eruption on two different rigs. One was his Fractal setup, and the other was a JCM 900. He didn't reveal which was which until the end of the video. I'll link to the video down below. It's definitely worth a watch. I'm not going to divulge which sample was which. I don't want to ruin it for anybody that hasn't seen the video and wants to test their own ears. It's a very interesting video, and he goes over a lot of things that went into this sound. So I asked the group if they were interested in me making a video to see how close I could come to the Brown sound on the first Van Halen album, and they said they were, and so here we are. Here's a couple of disclaimers. This is an exercise to see how close I can come to this tone here in my bedroom studio. I'm not a trained sound engineer. I do this purely as a hobby, and I know my limitations. So what are the limitations in this exercise? Well, here's a short list of things that I don't have to get this tone, starting with the amp that Eddie used. So we all know that Eddie used a 100 watt super lead, probably a plexi, 68, 69-ish, and he had that amp plugged into a Variac, and the Variac was turned down to 90 volts, and his amp tech would have biased the amp at this voltage. I have a 100 watt super lead. I have mine on a Variac. I don't turn it down past 100 volts when I am playing it. I do like the fact that the Variac protects the amp, and I do like the fact that the current is consistent through the Variac, whereas, plugging it straight into the wall, you're at the mercy of your power company, and you can get surges, especially as things in your house turn on and off like air conditioners. That amp also had a fat cap mod, and I'm referencing this from a Pete Thorn video, which I will link down below, where he's talking about obtaining the Brown sound and going through all the mods that were done on this. This was most likely a Jose mod. His amp also supposedly had a 50K mid-pot as opposed to the stock 25K. The cabinet he was using had a mix of JBL and greenbacks, and they were mic'd with two SM57s from what I've read. I also don't have the Sunset Sound Studios 1176 compressors, and I don't have their famous plate reverb. I also don't have Eddie's talent or touch on the guitar. Now, people will argue over and over again, I've seen this lately, where they argue that the tone is not in the fingers. No matter who's playing guitar, the tone sounds the same. And while that is technically true, dynamics are in the fingers, and dynamics, in my opinion, affect the tone. So, for example, I could play the same notes Stevie Ray plays, but I'm not going to sound like Stevie Ray, because Stevie Ray phrases things exceptionally well, and that's the difference. So I have Eddie's isolated guitar track from Running with the Devil, and this is the song I'm going to use. I hope you weren't expecting me to play Eruption. I'm not even going to attempt it. So I'm going to play the isolated track part of it, and then I'm going to play, and we're going to go back and forth. You'll know which is which. I'm not trying to do this as a blind comparison. After I'm done with that, then I'm going to go over the signal chain and discuss how I got the sound that I got. So I hope it's pretty close, and you be the judge. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Okay, here's the side-by-side comparison. I'm basically going to bounce back and forth between Eddie's isolated track on Running with the Devil and the sound that I came up with. So here we go. So one thing you'll notice in that side-by-side comparison is that the album version of the tone is very, very bright. Dweezil made reference to this in his video. He was basically saying that in the room, Eddie's amp would have been a little bit darker, but after all the post-processing, the sound was very bright coming out of the speakers. I tried to mimic that brightness, but I really couldn't do it without making it sound very harsh and unmusical, to be honest with you. So I basically left it a little bit darker. So let's go through signal chain here. So I'm going to start with the guitar. I'm playing my EVH Relic Frankenstrat. This is a fun guitar. I will say it's a pain in the ass to keep in tune. The D-Tuna, I have never been able to use that effectively, so if I want to play something in drop D, in slack tune, I just pick up another guitar that doesn't have a floating tremolo. Out of the guitar, I'm coming into, and let's go over to my effects here. The first thing in the signal chain is going to be a 10-band EQ. Now, Eddie used the Boss GE10. I couldn't get my hands on a GE10. obviously they don't make them anymore, and I'm sure I could find one on Reverb. Don't know that I want to spend the money for a vintage pedal. So I opted for the MXR 10 band. I also played with the Boss GE7. I think that the MXR has a different buffer in it. I went with the MXR because it's a little closer. Now, this is really the unsung hero of the Brown sound, in my opinion. A lot of people skip this, and basically what we're doing here is we're rolling off the low end and kind of hitting the amp harder with some mids and upper frequencies. So if you listen to take the delay off too, and we'll take the reverb out. Makes everything much more, you know, it's a tighter sound. It's a big difference. So if you really want to tighten up a tube amp, or any amp really for that matter, you'll see, especially with humbuckers, a lot of times the distortion sounds just a bit tubby, especially when you turn the amp up. Obviously, when you turn the amp up, you need to lower the bass, because turning the amp up introduces bass, and the 10-band EQ actually will take those bass frequencies out. Moving on, I've got, I'm going into an MXR Phase 95 and then into the EVH MXR Flanger. I'm not going to discuss these right now. We'll deal with those later. They weren't part of the sound I was using to get the sound for Running with the Devil. Coming out of that, I'm going into an El Capistan tape echo. So Eddie used an Echoplex, and the El Capistan is a digital representation of a single head and multi-head type tape echoes. And I've got it on I think it's a single head, but the repeat, and it was just like 1 or 1.5 repeats, and it was a very subtle effect that he used, but it was kind of almost an always on. And so it's one of those things where you'd notice it if it was gone, but you don't really notice it in the mix. And the delay is roughly around 308 milliseconds, so it's just like a tick. So, and Ain't Talking About Love, when he goes into the chorus, so if you that's without the delay. Now it gives it that little lilt or jump with the delay. Also, you know, in Running with the Devil. So coming out of that, I'm going into a noise gate, and that's just to keep the noise down, because this is a small studio space. There's a lot of electronics in here, and it does introduce noise even in the humbucking, with a humbucking pickup equipped guitar. And then from there, I'm going into my Universal Audio Effects Lion, and I don't have a camera on that, but the Lion emulates a 68 Plexi, and it actually emulates 3 different models of that amp. The first model would be a super bass of that era, basically like a 68 super bass, very clean, very Hendrixy actually. The second amp it emulates is the Super Lead 100 watt 1957 circuit, basically. And then they also have a Variact model. is got higher gain and supposedly has some of the mods and all of that. And to be quite honest with you, for this exercise, I jumped back and forth in between the two, and I found that the Super Lead had a closer sound, in my opinion, than the modded Variact model. So this is the Super Lead, and let me turn the echo off. And I just turned it. It's very subtle, but there is a difference I think it's more a difference in the way the amp feels. The modded Variact amp is a little squishier, got a little bit more compression, and I don't know, it just didn't sound as tight to me as the plain Super Lead. So we're back on the plain Super Lead. And then here's the modded. Like I said, it's very subtle. And I think I noticed the difference more when I had the rest of the effects turned on. Back to the Super Lead. I'm going to leave it there. From there, I'm going into Warm Audio's Pedal 76, which is a true, real transformer-based 1176 compressor. I have that after the amp to kind of mimic it being outboard gear in the studio. The compression ratio is 4:1. It's very low. It's got a fairly fast attack and release time in the output. So without the compressor, and then last but not least, I'm going into a Strymon Flint for reverb, and I'm using the 70s plate reverb setting. There was a lot of reverb in that first Van Halen album, and there was a lot of discussion, or there has been a lot of discussion, on how they recorded the reverb. A lot of people think that they pumped the reverb into the right channel and the guitar in the left, or vice versa. I can't really remember. But I saw an interview with the studio engineers at Sunset Studio that actually recorded that album, and they said no, that really wasn't the case. They didn't put the reverb in one channel and the guitar in the other. It kind of sounds like that because of the way they recorded. So without the reverb, and then with the reverb. Okay, I finally learned how to play that correctly, and it's still messing me up. But anyway, you get the idea. But you can see how tight that is. Everything is defined. It's very articulate. The phaser is also used in songs like Atomic Punk, so I'm going to try to play that now. So that's how he got that effect in Atomic Punk. So he also used the flanger in several songs. Ain't Talking About Love is one of them during the chorus. He would kick it on and off for these two notes. So they sound. And that's basically, you know, I guess the most recognizable or the most well-known use of flanger is in Unchained. Everybody knows that, so and then he kicks it on here for the chunk, 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 chunk. So yeah, that's it. That's my signal chain, and I hope I came close. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know how I did. I appreciate everybody watching. Please like and subscribe. It does help the channel out. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you.